Welcome to Policy and Culture, our conversation bridging the gap between music, sports, and politics. In today's society where civic power and political influence continues to shape our daily lives, it is never more important to understand the power of our voting bloc. Join us as we navigate the corridors of power and culture. My name is Dan Lloyd.
I'm Andrew Iodigi. We'll be bringing you our weekly messages to the grassroots as we bridge the gap between policy and culture.
And today, for our first guest and for our first episode of Policy and Culture, we're honored to have a representative of Long Island, but not just Long Island, of New York, that has made history herself. The first elected Haitian descendant in the state of New York for Assembly District 22, the one and only Assemblywoman Michaelle C.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
No, it's an honor. We're excited.
Yeah,
it's a
and
blessing.
policy and culture, two of my favorite things, right?
Absolutely. Bridging the gap between policy and culture. And again, our mission is to really just educate our community on how powerful not only our culture is, but how powerful our culture can be if we understand how to shift political will.
Exactly.
And so just to kick off our conversation, can you just talk a little bit about your district, the communities within your district, and the role that you play?
Yeah, so I am a New York State representative. Similar to, the federal level, there's two houses, the Senate and Congress. In New York State, there are two houses, the Senate and the Assembly. So I'm a representative of the Assembly, and I live and represent the local community of Elmont, Valley Stream, Franklin Square, Floral Park, South Floral Park, North Woodmere, and South Valley Stream. Can't forget a neighborhood, right? And I've been in elected office since 2013, and it's really been a pleasure representing such a diverse community. I'm telling you, 22nd Assembly District, you can get all types of food there. When I first started, I was like very skinny, and now I'm like bigger because, I'll be eating all types of food, whether it's Haitian cuisine, halal food, Italian, some Irish food and beer. It's a diverse community and really representative of what Long Island is all about.
Love it, love it. We know that, so you went to local high school, right? Public school?
Yeah, of course. I'm a child of public school. So living in Elmont, I actually attended H. Frank Carey High School. I was at the tail end of a program. It's called the Bridge Program. And because of the lack of diversity in parts of the school district, particularly at H. Frank Carey High School, they brought some of the black students from Elmont into Franklin Square to bring some diversity into the school. And it really was a great opportunity not only to see how education can impact communities, but to see what the other side of the fence looked like, how green the other side of the fence was. So I went to Carey, great school, great at lacrosse, great at football, right? Yeah, I heard that we beat your school a couple of times.
Nah, they couldn't get with us. They couldn't get us. They was Nassau County, we was Suffolk County. Only time we would meet them is like in the Long Island Championship. I didn't see them there.
You gotta tell them though, what school you talking about?
I'm from Amityville. Amityville High School. We had 4 state basketball championships in a row. We won 2 Long Island football championships in the midst of that. No, 1 Long Island football championship. I'm sorry, I'm lying. They lost the second year to Bethpage in the championship. So, I never seen Carey there though.
Yeah, you're embarrassing me now. Yeah. But it's really, I went to also Hofstra University. I'm a Long Island girl. Don't ask me about water or dog. I say those words very weird. But I went to Hofstra University, and I've been on Long Island ever since. I love New York. I love Long Island.
What did you study at Hofstra?
Sports medicine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I wanted to be a doctor. I went to school and I did chemistry and biochem, and I realized that's some crazy stuff. And I said, okay, no more. I want to actually be on the field. I want to be in clinical settings. And so I studied sports medicine to train to be an athletic trainer. One of those people who, when you see the athletes fall on the field, they run up and help, and they're the first one to triage. And, as you said before, sports is such a, uniter. And so, it was a natural, transition for me to go from, biomed to actual sports medicine. And, it's something that I've always loved, and I still do as a state legislator. I did the bill on name, image, likeness. So that student athletes,
really?
Yep, that was me,
Wow.
in New York State, so that student athletes can get paid because we know that, the NCAA gets real paid off of us as
Absolutely.
athletes, especially people of color. You know, they use our sweat equity to advance themselves. And now in New York State and all across the country, you know, student athletes can get paid and you know, profit off of their name, image, and likeness.
Nah, that's
So,
beautiful.
you know, even though I don't really, you know, use my degree, I use my degree.
Well, salute to you. I was not aware of that. That's
Yeah.
incredible. That's,
It's
that
one of
was
those things that, you know, we don't talk
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, it's like the new phenomenon in sports for college athletes right now,
Yeah.
so that's definitely major.
Yeah.
I wanted to, you know, ask a question more so, you know, you speaking of these towns and these districts here on Long Island, and we see the lack for, you know, engagement in politics. I want to know what kind of got you there. You know, we see you here as the Assemblywoman Michaelle Solages. What was the early stages of that? What was it like coming up, and what was it that caught your attention to make you want to embody that?
Yeah. So I always tell people, I start off like this. You know, Ronald Reagan, the former president, once said that if a Republican died and went to heaven, it would look like Nassau County. When you think about Long Island, people assume that, you know, Long Island is straight privilege. People have, you know, houses and ponies, and, you know, we all drive Rolls. Yeah, we have Rolls Royce. And there's an interpretation across the state that, you know, Long Island's a wealthy area, but we know that there's a middle class and there's pockets of poverty in Long Island. And so, you know, what made me get involved was that I want to represent, you know, millennials. I want to represent middle-class families in state government. When I entered the state assembly in 2013, which is not long ago, about 11 years, I was probably one of the youngest members at the time. Like literally, there was another woman who was also young, and she was 45, and I was elected at the age of 26.
wow.
So yeah, at the time there wasn't much representation from young people. But even before that, you know, I wanted to get involved in politics because it was important that we build that next generation. And so when I first started, like I didn't, you know, jump into politics being like I'm gonna run for office. If you told me if I want to run for office, I would be like, you're crazy. I would be like, no, because I'm an introvert. And so when I first started, I started putting up campaign signs. I started, you know, door knocking, doing the phone calls, and then my brother ran. And, you know, Carrie Solages, she's a Nassau County legislature. And there was an incident where some guy came to our campaign office and started calling us racist names, started using the N-word, saying that, you know, we need to go in the back of the bus where we belong. And that really made me realize that we need more of us to be in politics, whether it's, you know, age, race, ethnicity. We need more diversity in government because it's important that we have different voices, different perspectives, different thought processes.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, especially on Long Island, where there's unfortunately a deep history of racial segregation,
Correct,
both
yeah.
economically and just also education.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about, so you did mention your brother. In a way, the Solages has a political family, a little dynasty on Long Island.
Yeah. You know, my brother's a Nassau County legislator.
Yeah.
My other brother is also a judge. And it just happened to be that, you know, my father was really big into public service. He was in the military. And he really always encouraged us to give back to our communities. He said, hey, look, you got to give back. You got to, you know, make what you have even better for the next generation. He's also strict, you know, being Haitian.
I was going to ask you, how was the Haitian upbringing?
Dude, there was only 3 places I can go, you know, school, home, and church, you know? And, you know, I never got an opportunity to go outside of those 3 places. So it was a very strict upbringing. But, you know, it helped make me realize that, you know, I got to first love myself, you know, because in this society for black women, you know, we're always told that we're not good enough. And so, you know, it made me love myself, and it also made me love my family. And that's, I guess, why we're a political family, because, you know, we always are close and we always help each other. So I used to help my brother Carrie because my mom said, hey, you got to help your brother. And I was cheap free labor. So, so I helped him out. So, you know, it's again, you know, family, community is so important. You know, it's all we got.
Yeah. And just wanted to talk about family, because not only are you a black woman, an elected black woman, but you also are a mother.
Yes.
And so you have to travel to Albany quite a lot. Can you just talk about how do you balance the, I don't know if it's pressures of representing your community, but then also being a mother.
How we all balance our lives, you know?
Well, I now have 2 kids.
Oh, yeah.
And so, but I'm not the mother, so to say, like I'm
Yeah.
actively working. I can't imagine how the balancing working mother and just the
Yeah.
obligations of life, it's a lot. It's really, really difficult.
It's funny, when I first got into Assembly, some person who was like a, quote unquote mentor turned around to me and was like, there's 2 things that you don't do. They said, first, don't get a dog. And I'm like, come on, a dog, And they said, second, don't have kids.
Whoa.
Yeah, she said, because you might be perceived as not being serious about the job because of the work-life balance.
Yeah.
So, later that week I got a dog. Yeah, I got a Chihuahua Beagle. I don't know why I got Chihuahua. I don't know if anyone knows. They're hard to train. And then, I was married. So later on, we had kids, and it hasn't hampered my career at all. It's tough.
Yeah.
I tell people it's not easy balancing both, but a lot of the policies that I've implemented, like ensuring that Black women have access to breastfeeding, resources, access to doulas, making sure that we tackle maternity mortality crisis. All those, initiatives was because of my experience as a legislator, my experience as a mother, and changing the dynamic and changing the policy. And so it's tough. I tell people politics it's a participation sport. It's elbows, it's kicks, it's bruises. But yeah, at the end of the day, if we're not involved, we are left behind. No one's speaking up for us in there, because we know that money is power up there.
Oh, yeah.
Voting is power, and so making sure that we have that voice is essential.
And speaking of those elbows and shoulders and stuff, I know Dan just asked you as far as like being a mother, but I know going into that battlefield, that specific arena, it's kind of like a man's sport.
Yeah.
So how was that? How was you able to kind of, face those nuances and kind of navigate through those journeys in your life in politics?
I don't even think about it. People ask me, how do I do it? Like sometimes you can't defeat yourself. Like an athlete on the field, you can't, like you're going against a championship team. You can't be like, oh, well, they're the champions and we're not. You just don't think about it. You make sure that you have a plan, you prepare, making sure that you're on your P's and Q's. And for us, as as young people, even as people of color, we always gotta be greater than the standard. We always got to be, ensuring that we are, not playing around. And so when I come to, the chamber, I pretend like I'm coming to the, the sports field, and that I'm bringing all my energy and all my power and making sure I'm bringing others. We got to build a team. So, you mentioned before, I'm always around new people.
Yeah.
I love having interns because I want to show them that government is possible. Even if they're not studying political science, I bring them because, I think policy and politics impacts every facet of our lives. It's
definitely.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it shifts political will, and we have to ensure that we're making that shift enhance our communities.
Exactly.
Proof of progress is something that we constantly say within our circles.
Proof of progress? That's a big word.
and I feel like the proof of progress is like major. Around here we try to hold our elected officials really accountable for everything. We try to really bridge the gap in the community to know what these people are. We have Meet the Candidates event where we try to introduce them to the community, explain to them the roles that they provide in the community, things like that, because I feel like it needs to kind of be like a median, like a translator for somebody to come back into these neighborhoods, the low-income neighborhoods, the middle class that we talk about, to really explain what's going on, because they really don't know. Something as small as a school board election, something as small as these local elections, we focus on just the presidential things like Joe Biden, Donald Trump. These local elections are like very, very important, and we really we got to have like a sense of urgency about that. Like, what are some things that you see, in your travels in this, that we could kind of do to kind of get to the people more, to kind of get this messaging out, because we're on the ground. Me and Dan was out in Nassau. We're doing a lot of work in Nassau right now too. We was in Nassau the other day working with Opportunities Long Island for the unions and the trades and stuff like that. And we went down into the neighborhoods and the actual hoods in Hempstead and Roosevelt and Uniondale. We was down on Terrace Ave, went into the buildings, met with the people, and we see the disconnect, but we also see the eagerness and the hunger for the information. They're hungry for the information. So what is it that we could do to kind of really bridge that gap? Because I think that's the missing space in our community. It's like a very big disconnect. Like we get riled up for a presidential election. Donald Trump had us all in an uproar.
Yeah.
But these local elections really affect our quality of life. How can we get that messaging out there to show the people the real importance of that?
Yeah, and I always tell people, like, it's local politics matters the most in their everyday life. When people call me, the major federal issue they may talk about the most is immigration. Because, New York is a boiling pot, a first stop for many new immigrants. But outside of that, potholes, street lights, housing, jobs, workforce, that's all local initiatives. And someone told me the other day, a lot of the lobbyists and big money groups are not looking at DC anymore, Washington, because it's a mess. They're saying that you can't get anything done. And they're all shifting all money and political power to the local level and also to the state level. So a lot of focus is happening there because people are now, there's been a whole resurgence of civic engagement, and so now all types of people are talking about school board elections and talking about state politics. And so for us, how do we get engaged? I tell people the easiest way to get engaged is go to like a school board meeting, go to a library board meeting, and just find out what it is. I think education about what the different facet is like number one, because most people don't know. People call me all the time congressperson, because they don't know the different positions, and it's not because of ignorance. It's because it's just convoluted. Here in Long Island, there's so many different layers of government. So first, I would say let's get people just cognizant of the system, of what's available to them, and then next we just got to get people out, for elections. Long Island, we have a lot of voter suppression. A lot of voter intimidation that goes on, and I think when people don't understand that, you even elect your fire commissioner in your fire districts, and they get confused. That's a form of voter suppression, confusion. So we just gotta lay it out simple that there's so many different layers of government, and you just gotta get involved in anything.
Nah, absolutely. And it's, me and Dan had these conversations personally all the time. It's just, real community engagement. Community engagement from, youth centers to the firehouse to the local churches to even the library board elections. Those really play a, crucial part in our neighborhood. So I really believe it takes being able to identify with someone. And I'm kind of noticing a trend across Long Island, especially with our black women. I'm seeing a lot of black women in position. This is my first time meeting you, but I've met Assemblywoman Kimberly John Pierre. Me and her have been working closely together for like the past 8 years, and I just see like a vibrantness in you guys. And it's like it could really be narrative change, and I believe you guys kind of give young women something to look up to right now. And I think that got to be kind of put more to the forefront, because there's just so many other distractions that kind of like occupy our young women's idle time. And what you guys are doing are amazing, and you're still culturally relevant. I feel like you're still, to the culture. We had a side conversation, and I could tell that me and Kimberly speak all the time. She comes to the park to catch games, and it's a like you said, a melting pot. The environment is real different. It's sometimes 1,200 to 2,000 people there. It's like Long Island's Rucker Park, but it's uncomfortable for certain people. So for her to come in there and kind of speak to the people like that, I feel like it's just kind of testament to being on the grounds, because I feel like you guys do the dirty work. Nobody kind of knows about those bills that you guys pass, and like the behind the scenes work that you really don't get credit for. We kind of like always credit the revolutionary. We don't really credit the people that's doing the behind the scenes work. So I want to figure out a way where we kind of get you guys, Kimberly John Pierre's, the Vanessa Streeters, the Michaelle Solages, more in front of these young girls in our black communities, to give them something different to look at.
It's true, and I think when you empower women, you empower families, and you empower the next generation. And that's what it's about. All those people that you name are all, women in the forefront of our communities trying to push. And we also need to empower young men. In Long Island, we have a diversity in education problem. In New York State, actually, people of color represent the majority of the student body. So the majority of students in New York State are black and brown individuals. But when we talk about who's in front of the classroom, it's not us. And so the problem is that we don't even have enough Black or Latino men in schools. And so, that's an issue I think a bunch of Long Island legislators are trying to work on. Between Kimberly, Phil Ramos, and I, we're trying to figure out how we can build more of a pipeline for men of color to be in the teaching profession. So we've been working with people in the NAACP, both in Islip and in Nassau County, about doing this law called the HOPE Act. And it's about making sure that these school districts are advertising to people of color, making sure that, because sometimes, in education in Long Island, in order to work in a school, you got to know somebody.
Yeah.
If you don't know somebody, you don't get the job, And that stops us from getting access to those jobs. So we're going to try to break down those barriers, because at the end of the day, education is a great equalizer. And, on Long Island, depending on your zip code, you can get a good education or you can get a substandard education. That's wrong.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit. And shout out to Billy Morse, too.
Yeah,
Hope
Bill
Act.
Morse,
I know he's been advocating for that for quite some time. You mentioned, Drew, that we were in Hempstead the other day, Terrace, and it was probably about 15 to 20 young Black men that was there and that we got to talk to. And when we say they were hungry, I mean they were hungry. And this was about getting into union and getting into the pre-apprenticeship. Do I need an ID? Certain things that you see that are barriers to them just getting into this trade. And a lot of that stems from, we have a book on our table, it's The Color of Law. And it talks about the early segregation on Long Island. And one of the things that you're working on is a reparations bill.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that and how that would potentially help with how our public schools are funded? Because that's one of the big problems with our education system, is that depending on what zip code you live in, those public schools are funded by property taxes and commercial taxes. And in a way, it's just not economically just that you get an education based upon how much tax you raise in your community. And we see that as a huge inefficiency for the last 50, 60 years, but also our future. So can you just talk a little bit about how that reparations bill you're working on can address that?
So I recently submitted legislation that created a commission just to talk about reparations, because reparations is controversial. The direct definition of reparations is righting the wrongs of the past. So when we look at slavery in New York State actually was very complicit in the slave trade. We banned slavery, but we still actually funded the insurance companies. Well, in New York State, we still had the insurance companies that funded and insured the plantations down south. When we talk about Wall Street, that's not just a street in New York City. That was actually a place where slaves were bought and sold. And even when it was banned, slavery was banned in New York State, slaves were still bought there and then sent down south. So we have blood on our hands when we talk about slavery. And then, even when we banned slavery, slavery morphed into, different other faces, whether it's black code, whether it's, housing segregation, Jim Crow. It just, slavery has become a new thing, mass incarceration. And so I have a bill that passed both the Assembly and Senate. It's waiting for the governor's signature, that would just look at what reparations would look like in New York State. We need to have this conversation because we need to start healing our communities.
Yeah.
As you said, we have massive housing segregation on Long Island, some of the worst segregation in the country. And this book right here, called Law of Reference, the Levittown community, that had language and deeds and covenants that said you cannot sell to black people. And that was one of the greatest, the Levittown housing program was one of the greatest housing programs that was funded by the government. It actually gave housing to individuals who came back from World War II, which, housing is economic empowerment, it's asset, diversion to communities, to people. And so us as blacks were not able to gain that. And so we were excluded from these high wealth neighborhoods. We were excluded from economic opportunities. So the reparations bill would say, hey, look, let's look at what reparations would look like in New York State. Let's analyze it from soup to nuts. Let's hear from New Yorkers about what reparations means to them, whether it's a policy change or a check at the end of the day, we just want to hear from New Yorkers, and then a report would be issued. It would be a non-binding report, so the legislature would not have to act on the report. It would just be information for us, and then we could decide, 2 years from now, what we do in New York State with the reparations issues. If you look across the country, there are many localities that have implemented a reparations initiative. In Illinois, they actually have given $250,000 cash payments to Black individuals to buy houses. And you see many of them are buying houses in neighborhoods and gaining economic empowerment. And so we have to see what that looks like in New York State.
I was going to say that I think there's two things I think reparations would be really, really valuable for our community. One is definitely giving something of that nature, like a $250,000 deposit to buy a home. Why? Because of Levittown. So when the individuals in the 50s bought the house in Levittown, they were like $7,500 down payment, if that, $4,500. And then the value was around $150,000, $250,000 up to about the 70s and 80s. So that would at least make up some of that housing equity in a way. The only problem is obviously on Long Island is land, right?
Yes.
How would we figure that out with the property? The second, I think, is definitely education. There should be massive funding into public schools that don't have the property and commercial tax to fund the proper education that our schools and our children need. And I feel like we need to talk more about that, especially when there's so much pushback about reparations. Then why not address the education gap?
And also the history of that too, it really spiked my interest. That aspect you spoke about as far as the housing in Levittown, because when the people came back from the war, they went to go buy homes over there, but they were forced in my community, North Amityville, and it's a rich history in my community with, civil things and politics and stuff like that. They created a specific area called Roneck Park. That's Croydon Road. That's what else is over there? Emerald Lane. That's Bayview, Avon, all of those blocks over there in Amityville, and that's where we was forced to live at. That's where we was forced to, relocate. Yeah, and they was just like little, like 2-bedroom flats. The houses are still the same over there. So I just think it's like real, rich history there with that, and it's real. Real need for that. And I believe if our people knew the history of it, knew that these places right here in Long Island, this is what this was. It was a newspaper article I printed out, and we was talking about the prices of the homes. And it was just, I think it was dirt low. I couldn't remember the exact price of it, but it was crazy. So that's something else I think that, we need as far as history on that to kind of know.
Exactly, and that's what reparations also is about. It's about history. It's about learning what our history is, because you realize there are areas in New York State where there were wealthy or free Black communities that were taken over and decimated. So the greatest example is Seneca Village. Seneca Village is where Central Park is now.
Yeah.
And, that community, they didn't get any monies for their land. They just basically got kicked out. And Central Park was built for wealthy areas around Manhattan. And so we have a list of all those people who live there. We can find out where they are and make their lives right, because they should have land and property in Manhattan. And there's another place called Timbuktu in upstate New York, where in order for people to vote in the 1800s, they had to have property, because they knew that Blacks didn't have property. So there was a guy by the name of Mr. Brown who owned acres of land in the Adirondacks, and he gave that land to Black families. He basically went downstate, said, "Hey, I have property."
This was a Black guy or a white guy?
It was a white guy,
okay,
an abolitionist.
Okay.
And he said, "I'm going to give you property," and gave hundreds of thousands of Black family property. But because the families didn't have the tools or resources or knowledge of farming, the community basically got decimated.
They couldn't maintain
it. They couldn't maintain the land. And so they were able to vote for some elections, but then after a while their community disappeared. But we don't have a marker, we don't have a history, we don't have facts about this in our education system. Reparations could solve that. It's about healing.
So with that going on today, right, this guy granting them the land, Mr. Brown granting them the land, right, with no knowledge to how to maintain these things, what would be different with reparations today? If we getting this funding or we getting this type of land, what would be different with the processing and information for us to maintain and kind of grow it?
Yeah, so I believe that reparations is about healing and remedies. So my focus would be, and I'm not on the commission, but as the legislation dictates, 3 from the Assembly, so 3 people on the commission from the Assembly, 3 people from the Senate, and 3 people from the executive. The people I want to appoint, I want them to focus on policy changes and how we can make the system better. Because at the end of the day, you could give someone a payment, but if we still have systematic racism in healthcare, in education, in housing, we're not going to solve the issue. So I want to break the system. I want to make it so that our children are educated. I want to make it sure that when we go for healthcare, we don't have to keep paying co-pays and struggling with finding specialists. I want to break the system so that we can provide opportunity for our communities, because that will build generational wealth. That will build our communities when we change the racist policies that exist in our system currently.
There's a few things. Actually, can you break down the process of a bill for our listeners and also those that are watching, just so they can get a simple concept of how, if they have an idea, we like to say communicate the pain.
Oh,
right?
Like
because
that,
if you could communicate the pain, not that everything is negative, but we're talking about proof of progress. In order to effectively have proof of progress, you have to effectively communicate the pain or the convenience. And in this case, we're trying to figure out how to solve a lot of socioeconomic issues. So if somebody has a pain or was disrespected or feels like their community is getting slighted, how could they potentially get a bill into the state of New York?
Yeah, so I feel like singing the song, I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only on.
We're going to have to plug that in.
No. But, it's on its face value, it's a pretty simple process. A bill has to pass the Assembly, pass the Senate, and be signed by the governor. Seems simple, right? But it's not. It really is a political process, because you have to get 213 people to consider the bill.
Why 213?
Well, in the sense that 213 people have to look at the bill and have to vote on the bill. But in the Assembly, you have to get the majority, which is more than 76.
Okay.
And the Senate, it's more than 32 people to vote yes on the bill. You also have to fight against special interests. Because people forget that there's corporations in America that now have a voice. And they can spend unlimited money to stop basic bills. And so, now, when you try to pass a bill in state government, you have to fight against, lobbyists and special interests who might be for your bill or against your bill. For example, I passed a bill that would require all cosmetologists to learn about textured hair.
I just saw that. That's recent, right? Was that this week?
Yeah, it was signed last week.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it was important to me because, when I first got into politics, someone said to me, I got to straighten my hair. They were like, you have to have straight hair. As a woman, every political woman has straight hair.
So they told you no dog, no kids, and straight.
A lot of rules. Yeah, I'm telling you, there's a lot of rules for us. And so for 10 years, I would straighten my hair. And, I use relaxers, which, relaxers, it has a lot of bad chemicals. Carcinogens that cause cancer and reproductive issues for women. And so, it took me about, 10 years to realize, like, I'm really doing damage to my scalp. And, beauty is a billion-dollar industry that's driven by Black women, driven by, by people of color. And so, I decided that, look, I looked at the law. We passed the Crown Act in 2017. Gary Pretlow, who is my colleague in the Assembly, passed some great legislation against discrimination when it comes to salons and cosmetologists. But in the law, we didn't say that we needed to make sure that these cosmetologists learned about coily and curly hair. It doesn't really say that, and we call it textured hair. And so I put in law saying that, hey, look, we have to, cosmetologists have to learn about textured hair. And you would think that's easy, right? You would think that, okay, let me do that. But there were actually individuals fighting against the bill. They felt that we didn't really need to define that. We didn't really need to do that. That should be someone's option. And then also I had some good support. You know, I had major organizations, major beauty companies support the legislation and push the legislation. I had organizations and coalitions, different people get together and, you know, come to Albany and lobby for the bill. And so to the point when we say, you know, the challenges, you know, there's a lot of opinions out there. And it's about making sure you bring people together, educate my colleagues, and pass the bill through the Assembly, pass the bill through the Senate, and then lobby the governor to sign the bill.
And this one of them situations where I feel like I got to translate a little bit, kind of, when we talk about. What we basically saying is, you guys don't got to wear your hair square no more. She passed the bill to where, ladies, you could come as you please. If you want curls, you want to wrap it up, if you want the box braids, you could do your thing. So that's basically what she just did, and that's the kind of translation and verbiage that we got to have when we speaking on politics, because these things are so relevant.
Exactly, and that's why representation matters, because, you know, we got to bring that culture. We got to make people understand that we need to change the laws to make it more inclusive, diverse, you know, and available to all of us. And that's like a law that you would think like, oh, that doesn't matter, you know, but it does, you know.
We wanted to talk, we want to have a little fun in a bit, but before that, let's talk about jobs. Let's talk about new industries coming to Long Island. Let's talk about the green economy.
Yes.
We're very active with making sure that the future of our community, specifically young people of color, get into the green economy. On Long Island right now, there was just a massive announcement from the state, and I served about 3 offshore wind recipients. And so can you talk a little bit within your district, but just in general, the region, how massive the clean economy offshore wind is going to open up the doors for a lot of our communities to have sustainable jobs and careers in the next few years?
Yeah. So in New York State, we actually passed some of the most aggressive climate laws in the country. Because for me, as a Long Islander, we live on a barrier island. So what does that mean? You know, break it down, right? It means that we live on an island, and that, you know, when the earth warms, the water is going to rise. And we're gonna, you know, have rising sea levels.
We won't be here.
We won't be basically. We got beachfront property up in the middle of Long Island. But you know, we're going to feel the impacts of the climate. You know, people now before. You know, some people, when I grew up, I didn't have an AC. My mom made me sweat, you know, and I just chilled in the house. I went to the library sometimes. But now you have to have an AC. That's because the world is getting hotter, you know, the world is warming. And, you know, we are now transitioning to a green economy where we have to look at some of these climate laws and make it more fairer to our communities, especially our disadvantaged communities. And that means economic opportunity. So, you talked about the green economy. I want to talk about the blue economy, which is, you know, the water that we have surrounding us. And making sure that the wind turbines, all those good paying union jobs, we get access to that. So, you know, it's great that we're building, or we want to build these big wind turbines offshore. That's fabulous. You know, we're going to meet our renewable goals. But at the end of the day, if I don't see, you know, middle class, black and brown, marginalized people working those jobs, we didn't do what we need to do. You know, and so, you know, we saw that there are a lot of hiccups that happened recently with some of these initiatives. But we gotta rebound because those are good paying jobs for our communities. Those are new jobs in an emerging economy. And that's Long Island jobs. Those are strictly going to impact Long Island because those wind turbine workers are not going to be living in New Jersey. They're not going to be living in Manhattan. They're going to be living on Long Island.
And that's proof of progress. So we have to learn from the past and ensure that we get. And Long Island's becoming more diverse. It is what it is. So
it's something I wanted to speak about with that as well. Like, you know, when you get involved with the work, you kind of see the bigger problem, right? And we've been working with like Opportunities Long Island, a couple of other offshore wind industries, kind of get people in the apprenticeship program. And what I'm noticing is that like the application process is just a little bit kind of like rigorous. They're requiring things that I really don't think are necessary. And you know, and they're targeting these communities. So I feel like it needs to be either information on getting these things, something like a driver's license. So you're going to provide them, you know, the proper steps to get their driver's license or the proper steps to get a GED. Those were some of the problems that we seen going into those communities. I can't do it, I don't got my license. I can't do it, I got my GED. You're not going to be driving a lot of those times in an apprenticeship program. So is there a way that we could kind of like break those barriers down for entry as well? Because I see that's kind of the problem. People want the information, they kind of get to the door and it's kind of being blocked off a little bit.
Yeah, and that's one issue I talked about with some of these companies. I said, you know, you have to be laser focused and looking at marginalized communities, because that's really where we're going to build economic wealth. And so, you know, having these conversations is really important with these big industries and making it contingent. So if they want state government support, if they want, you know, subsidies from government, that subsidies means like if they want money from us, they gotta give us something. So, you know, that these are conversations that we're having. But you know, I think first as our communities, we have to stop disqualifying ourselves. We always say, oh well, I don't know if I could do that job. You know, and I think that's something that we need to stop doing, and we should just build these apprenticeship programs to be very entry level. So that's something I know I definitely will take back. But for me, when I have any of these special interest groups come to me, talking to me, I always ask them, what are you doing to ensure that you're building a pipeline? And making it so entry level, making it so level setting that anyone can enter into these jobs is something that I support. Even those who, you know, were justice involved, for example, who may have a record, you know, they should be looking at ways that they can bring them through that pipeline and get them these jobs, because at the end of the day, you know, people deserve second chances. You know, if you did your time, you stayed out of trouble, and you're looking for opportunity, you should get that opportunity.
Speaking of that, can you talk real quickly about the Clean Slate Act?
Yeah,
that's massive.
Yeah, it's massive. You know, I'm grateful. We passed in the state legislature a law. Currently in New York State, if you you know, serve your time, you stay out of trouble, you can go in front of a court of law and get your record expunged. It means, you know, basically sealed, so that, you know, employers or, you know, potential you know, housing, or, you know, if you're applying for something, they don't see your record in certain instances. So in New York State, we made it automatic. We said, hey, look, you don't have to go before court law, you don't have to pay. Basically, after a certain amount of years, I believe it's you know, 8 years, depending on what it is, you can get your records automatically sealed.
Is that misdemeanor and felony?
So it's only misdemeanor.
Okay.
And you know, this is a, you know, a conversation that we need to have. You know, whether we expand it. But at the end of the day, it's really just targeting those, you know, young people or, you know, individuals who did a crime many years ago. You know, they weren't, you know, they could have been in a bad spot.
Yeah.
Or it could be even young people who, you know, developmentally, young people only develop, you know, adult minds at the age of 21.
Yeah.
And so under 21, you know, these young people do crazy things.
Yeah.
And so the intent of this law was really to make sure that, you know, the people who've done their time, who've stayed out of trouble for a long time, get opportunities. And I think that's fair. This is what America's all about. It's the land of opportunity and the land of proving yourself.
Yep.
And so, you know, Clean Slate will help millions of people across the state. And that bill was passed with business support, with the support of the criminal justice groups, with a lot of coalitions believing that people should deserve it as second chance.
Proof of progress. So we want to wrap up. We want to have a little fun, though.
Okay.
So we're going to ask you some questions. Again, we talk about policy and culture. We love sports, music, and also politics. But when we ask you these questions, you got to choose one or the other. If you don't want to choose, you can just say both, or if you want to keep it political.
Okay,
if you want to be political correct, you can keep it political. But the purpose of this question is to, if we had to get a massive issue solved, it could be getting millions of people out to vote, it could be bringing in millions of dollars into the community, who would you choose? Either one of these individuals or either one of these platforms.
Okay.
So we can start off. I have something in my mind.
It's like, should I go like this?
If we wanted to bring 1 million people out to vote, who would you choose to lead the charge? Michelle Obama or Beyonce?
Oh, you know, because of the culture, you gotta be Beyonce.
Beyonce?
Yeah,
Okay.
Beyonce, yeah.
Okay.
But for politicals, I would say Michelle Obama.
It gotta be either one, though.
So I would say Beyonce.
Beyonce,
Beehive
okay.
is strong.
Beehive.
You can't be
Okay.
commenting. Beehive will be after you. So
Okay, that's fair.
Beyonce.
Yeah, Beehive is strong.
Yeah.
Okay. If you wanted to shift political will and economically progress our community, would you rather have $500 million to allocate directly to the community or be the Speaker of the House?
Like me in particular, be the Speaker of the House?
Or just position?
I would think the position.
The position?
Yes, yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, because you know, I served under another speaker, and now I serve under Carl Hasty, who's the current Speaker of the Assembly, and he has shifted the culture, and he has made it accessible to the members to push policy and initiatives. So we can be giving out allocations of money over and over again by having a leader in the House that believes in, you know, representation for all. So for me, you know, political power is something that people don't realize can change and shift the conversation, and I've seen it firsthand by, you know, our Speaker Carl Hasty. So
yeah, shout out to Speaker Hasty. First of all, we got you know,
Yeah.
he's a big
Prince right
fan.
there.
And also, Drew, talk a little bit about he came to the Met.
He took the words right out of my mouth, man. Shout out to Carl Hasty. He came to Boulder Mac Park and chopped it up with us this summer, and actually, like, you know, provided us with some monies. He gave us $50,000 to, you know, support the mission of Boulder Mac Park going into our 8th year. So shout out to him, man. He's from the culture. He came out there talking crazy too, because we was playing.
Normal dude. He's like a normal dude.
We played against Kevin Riley and Jamal Bailey at the Politics and Personality basketball tournament. They ended up beating us in the championship. I missed the free throw. I'm gonna take the blame.
Missed the free
I missed
throw,
the free throw to send him home.
In the Bronx.
I'm telling
them in the Bronx.
You wanted to get home. That's
yeah,
what.
this is what the Speaker Hasty says to me. So I tell him, he said, yeah, you know, Kevin and Jamal, they interned under me or whatever the case may be. But I'm like, yeah, we played them in a you know, the basketball tournament out there, the YMCA in the Bronx. Man, it was a good turnout. He goes, yeah, you must have lost because you ain't say nothing about who won. So, you know, that was my first encounter with him, man. But he was definitely supportive of it, man. He knew the kind of history of the basketball there, so it was good to chop it up with him, man. Shout out to him.
And he made it member-driven, which is like the Assembly now is very member-driven, which is awesome. So, you know, we could allocate, you know, the budget is $217 billion.
Oh, see?
So,
well, that's right.
So we can allocate that over and over again when you have a speaker who really believes in the people, like Carl Hasty.
Well, Assemblywoman Solages, we're so grateful, honored to have you as our first guest on policy and culture. It's an incredible discussion. Can't wait to have you back as we continue to grow. For us, it's also proof of progress. And again, our policy and culture conversation is discussing music, sports, and politics. And can you just let our listeners and viewers know where to follow you on social media, how to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so they can follow me on all platforms. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, you know, all social media at Solages NY. Very simple, SOLAGES NY. And, you know, I love to engage people and do funny memes and TikTok. So, you know, watch it.
Love it. And you can follow us at Policy and Culture. That is POLICYN Culture, CULTURE. My name is Dan Lloyd.
I'm Andrew DG.
And thank you for joining us.